So I got a call from the Boston Anti-Slavery Society, which I was surprised at. I actually didn't think they still existed in 2000. So I said, yeah, gee, of course I'd love to meet with them. I don't know what they're doing, but come meet with them. They came in, and they brought a young gentleman with them from Sudan who had been an actual, honest-to-God, up-on-the-block slave. So I got a call from the Boston Anti-Slavery Society, which I was surprised at. I actually didn't think they still existed in 2000. So I said, yeah, gee, of course I'd love to meet with them. I don't know what they're doing, but come meet with them. They came in, and they brought a young gentleman with them from Sudan who had been an actual, honest-to-God, up-on-the-block slave. Up-on-the-block slave.
Hello and welcome to Insights from Abroad. This podcast is part of the Middle East and South Asia Initiative in the College of Sciences at the University of Central Florida. And here is to educate, engage, and influence the international community. Today, I am joined by Representative Mike Capuano. So that listeners are aware, Representative Capuano is an American politician who has served as a U.S. representative from Massachusetts from 1999 to 2019. A Democrat, his district included the northern three-fourths of Boston, those parts of Cambridge, his hometown of Somerville, and other communities immediately north and south of Boston. Prior to being elected to Congress, he served as an alderman and as a mayor of Somerville. You've had a long and distinguished career as a politician. Can you share with us how you came to politics and public service as a career?
Yeah, kind of simple. I got angry. I grew up in an urban area, was poor, and anybody who grows up in one of those neighborhoods, you don't know what you're missing because you don't know. Then I went to college and missing because you don't know. Then I went to college and graduate school, and I moved back to my home city and still didn't notice much because your life changes when you're no longer a kid hanging around on playgrounds. And then my wife and I had a child, and we realized soon thereafter that there were no playgrounds in my city that we could bring them. They weren't safe because they were fine by me. I knew all the tough guys. And I got angry, to be perfectly honest. It's the first time in my life it dawned on me that you don't have to accept life the way it is. You can try to change it. And I did. So I ran for city council and got lucky and won.
Right. And so sort of that local drive of local issues is what drove you to enter.
It was local issues, but the bottom line, it was anger at inequality, anger at inequity, anger at the lack of fair treatment and equal opportunity for lots of different people. And I don't think I would have put those words to it at the time, but over time I've come to realize that's the bottom line, because I joke about it, but it's true. I entered politics as an angry young man, and I left politics as an angry old man because there's still a lot of work to do.
Right. And so it's something you didn't really realize at the time, but you came to realize as you sort of saw more of.
For politics. Me, it was just a fight. It was just, a method neighborhood I was living in, the neighborhood I grew up in. And that just kind of changed over time. As we won fights, you made that better, and you made the city better, and then I had an opportunity to go to Congress and try to make the same fights on a national level.
Right. And moving into Congress, before you became a representative of Massachusetts, you were a mayor of Somerville. And can you describe to you?
Well, there are different kinds of mayors. In my city, it was what's called a strong mayor form of government. Namely, the mayor actually ran the city, and there wasn't a city manager. I think this mayor ran day to day. And it was a very political city. Somerville is the most densely populated city. It was the most densely populated city in America in 1950. It was the most densely populated city in America in 1950. And it's still the most densely populated city in New England by far. And that's a city that didn't have almost any high rises. It's just a densely populated. It was at the time a very family-oriented community. Everybody had 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 kids. It just wasn't unusual. Where the came from. Today, those same apartments that used to house 6, 7, or 8 family members now usually house 2 millennials because the city changed so much. It used to be a place that people measured their success by how quickly they could afford to move out. Now people can barely afford to move in because it's now a place that people want to move into. And that's not necessarily all good. There's a fair amount of bad to that because there has been a fair amount of gentrification. But it has been dramatically changed. So you make those fights, and as mayor, you get to see the results of your actions more quickly, one way or another. I mean, if you want to plant a tree or fix a pothole or whatever it is, you build a school, you name it, plant a tree or fix a pothole or whatever it is, you build a school, you name it, you can actually usually get it done more often than not. Your chances of success are much higher than in Congress. Number one. Number two, you can see the results pretty quickly and pretty measurably. There's a new school that 500 kids go to. In Congress, it takes time, particularly in the whole time I was there. It takes time, particularly in the whole time I was there. It was a very closely divided Congress. There was no significant majority in either side at any time. When you get into periods of history where Congress is equally divided, you tend not to make great strides in anything. It's all incremental, and you get the occasional Obamacare. That's the exception, not the rule. In Congress is a lot more frustrating than local politics.
Right. And would you say, like, entering as a representative, would you say that change was jarring, or did you kind of expect that going in?
I kind of expected. I've been doing politics all my adult life. I started relatively young, or just active in it. So I actually it's kind of funny. I always thought that the Northeast in general, newer members from the Northeast tended to be a little bit more politically astute than many people around the country, because we tended to elect people that had some experience in politics. Not everybody, obviously, and that's a generalization, but I think it's true. And I was one of them. There was nothing that surprised me in Congress of any major import. Some of the technical stuff surprised me because for instance, the rules. The House has a big, huge book of rules that nobody really uses. It's there, and then pretty much every bill that comes to the floor of the House says, well, for this bill, we're going to forget all the rules and make up our new rules for this bill. And they do it. They've been doing it now for the entire time I was in Congress. So therefore, the rules, if you read them and know them, and usually that's an advantage in a legislative technicality. Right. In general, it didn't surprise me at all.
Okay. That's interesting. You said the way you frame both is because Congress is more even though it has a more national range, it is way more difficult to influence. Whereas mayor, you get sort of a locality, but you get some more direct impact on
you have more uniformity of the time because you're fighting. It's like a family fight as to whether to build a school. For instance, in my community, there never would have been a debate of whether we should try to provide health care for everybody. We all agreed we should, and there might have been an argument about how to do it. In Congress, there was clearly a big fight about even whether to do it, and then a big fight as to how to do it, and it's a fight about even whether to do it, and then a big fight as to how to do it, and it still continues. That's the kind, and I think that'd be true about most communities. Whatever the issue is, you tend to have a little bit more uniformity of opinion. Plus, you know it. I mean, but it's a big, diverse country with a lot of different opinions, and in Congress, it's awfully hard to get 218 people to agree on pretty much anything. Most high schools can't do that, never mind the United States Congress.
Right. Is there a part of being a mayor that you missed while serving in the legislature?
Sure. The ability to actually get it done. Like I said, my city was a strong mayor form of government, so again, I didn't win every battle, but I won way more than I lost, and of course that's more satisfying. But at the same time, I will tell you that because my city, that's probably not unusual, but poorer cities tend to provide the opportunity for a lot more difficult local political activity. We had real strong local battles at the time, and again, that's a generalization, but I think it's pretty much true. Cities are oftentimes much more political than suburbs, and and for me, I'm a type A, hard-charging person, and I had a battle every single day with people that I knew, people I grew up with. Wasn't battling with people I didn't know, and that's a draining activity. So honestly, I'd been mayor for 9 years, and I was probably getting ready for a change one way or another. You can say, deep breath, what's next? And it just so happened for me, the congressional seat opened up when I was starting to consider that, and took a shot, and it worked out.
So, before becoming a representative, how did you envision Congress's role in foreign policy?
I mean, I didn't envision it. I knew it. I know what the Constitution says. I know what Congress can do if they choose to do it. The Constitution says I know what Congress can do if they choose to do it. I know how difficult it is to get members of Congress to agree on anything. I think if you're going to be in public life in any way, you have an obligation to have a pretty good understanding of history. And the recent history of Congress is not new, but it's been going on now for a while. One step at a time, Congress, in my opinion, authority, I would actually call its responsibility, particularly on foreign affairs, war and peace. As the prime example, Congress has repeatedly rolled over for not just Democrats and Republicans. Both sides have done it, all presidents on both parties, and the Congress tends to do whatever the president wants. That's an overmuch true. And so I kind of knew it. I don't like it. I know what the role of Congress is. That's why I'm proud of the fact that I sued both President Obama and President Bush on foreign affairs matters. Lost both of them, but you do what you can. If you can't, sometimes you can't win, but you still do what you think is right.
Yeah, that is definitely true in sort of the trend of growing executive power in foreign affairs. So, was that like sort of a change that you came to realize, or did you also know, like, by the books what Congress was supposed to do, and also what the ongoing trend was, or did you come to realize the trend?
No, I knew it before I went in, but.
Or did you come to realize the trend?
No, I knew it before I went in, and I actually think you have to know those kinds of things in order to do the best you can to fight against them. I won't say that I was successful, but I think Congress is still doing it. I actually think the Constitution is clear that Congress is the only body that can declare who thinks it's perfectly legal to lob missiles into sovereign countries. And I'm not arguing that Congress might not have approved that, but you have to ask. And if Congress wants to say, yes, throw missiles into this country, that's an act of war. You declare war and you go to war. But to just do it without authorization, with no direct threat to American interests, un-American, and I actually think dangerous.
Right. It's the skipping of a procedure that kind of opens the door to a lot of maybe rash or dangerous possibilities.
No one person should have the authority, the ability to bring this country to war. I mean, if the Congress as a group wants to agree, that's fine. I mean, it's not. I would have whether I agree or not. I mean, it's not. I would have whether I agree or not. And I've been on both sides of that. I understand that, but at least the American people have had a direct input with many voices, as opposed to one person who might be very upset because some country said something bad about his daddy, or whatever it might be. And it just, to me, that's called a king. And a king can bring a country, and a king can bring a country to war. I don't think America. I know America wasn't founded that way, and I am a student of the Constitution, which I think is very, 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 very clear. It doesn't say anything about the president declaring war. It only says that the Congress shall have the power to declare war.
Right. In 2005, you were one who voted against the war in Iraq and were in favor of withdrawing troops as well. Can you recall the political climate, like what it was like during this period?
Yeah, sure. Very well. It was soon after 9/11. I was about, give or take, a year after 9/11, I think it was. I had voted to send troops to Afghanistan. I'm proud of that vote, and it was the right vote. But I want to be clear. Troops to Afghanistan. I'm proud of that vote, and it was the right vote. But I want to be clear. I never voted in order to send troops to Afghanistan to free the Afghan people and or rebuild the country. Not because it's not the right thing to do, but because that's not what America has ever done. We don't have the ability to attack every country that has bad leaders. Or I don't think that right to a certain extent. But at the same time, in that particular case, it wasn't the Taliban that attacked the United States, but they were protecting Al Qaeda, who had attacked the United States, was very proud of it, and killed 3,000 of our citizens. I don't think you can sit idly by and just say, well, that's one act, it's too bad. I think you have to react, otherwise you're asking for it again. And when it came to Iraq, I did everything I could do to find the information, the weapons of mass destruction and all that stuff. And I found nothing. I didn't find just a little. I wasn't doubtful. There was absolutely, positively no intelligence that led me to believe that they had weapons of mass destruction, or that they had weapons of mass destruction that they would use. And not only did I have access to a fair amount of the intelligence, but I actually talked to a handful of people who even had higher clearance than I did. And I asked them, have you seen any information? Are you aware of anything that I haven't seen that has changed your mind? Even if you can't tell me what it is. Not one of them did. Not one of them had seen anything. So my argument is you just don't go to war on the basis of a whim or a gut feeling. Again, without a threat to the American interest. There was no threat to American interest. And again, Saddam Hussein was a bad guy. But bad guy. And again, if that's the criteria, we better invade about probably 60 countries tomorrow because I can name plenty of bad guys, but never been our criteria. I don't think it should be. And it changed. It went from getting Al Qaeda to now keeping the Taliban out, which, first of all, I don't think there's any authority to do that. And second of all, I don't think that's what America should be doing. If that's our criteria, your generation better be ready to have a constant war all over the world with the entire world hating us.
Oof, I'm not sure I'm ready for that. It's interesting. So you frame it as the mission change. So it wasn't exactly that your mindset changed. It was more so that the conditions had changed. And
Al Qaeda hasn't been in Afghanistan since about a year after we invaded them. And you can make an argument. I could make a legitimate argument that it would have been perfectly all right for our forces to not invade Pakistan, but at least to pursue Al Qaeda to Afghanistan. We did have special forces on the ground in Yemen chasing them because they had moved there. Al Qaeda is different than any other threat we have ever faced because they don't have a physical place. They moved. And yeah, it is whack-a-mole. That's exactly what it is. But I have no problem chasing them all around the world, wherever they are. And if they hole up in a country, you should, like we asked the Taliban, will you let us come in and deal with Al Qaeda? They said no. Okay, here we come. I think if they show up in Yemen or they're defeated, you ask that country, look, you now have a problem here. We can prove there's the problem. There's a problem. We want to send people in to deal with that problem. And if they say no, that's a different story. If they say yes, which several countries have said yes, Sudan being a classic example. That Bin Laden was in Sudan before he was in Afghanistan. Sudan changed their mind, and that doesn't make them a good government. I got tons of problems with Sudan, but at least on that issue, they changed their mind, and to my knowledge, at the moment, Al Qaeda is not welcome in Sudan anymore.
And regarding the Sudanese government, in 2003, you authored a resolution in the House condemning their actions. Could you recall to us how this issue came to your attention?
Dozens of issues. Yeah, I can. I can tell you. I mean, I'm no different than anybody else. I did not run for Congress to be an expert on foreign policy. I used to joke that my definition of a foreign government was going to the city of Cambridge. I'm a local parochial guy. I'm aware of international issues, but I'm no international expert. So I was, you get a call as a member of Congress, you get calls by all kinds of people you don't know that want to come meet with you, and I was very open about that. I'd like to meet with my constituents. So I got a call from the Boston Anti-Slavery Society, which I was surprised at. I actually didn't think they still exist. They were very active. We're very proud of the history that Boston played in the pre-Civil War era, trying to help people get free. And there was a very strong anti-slavery movement. So I was very proud of it, but I didn't know they still existed in 2000. So I said, yeah, gee, of course I'd like to meet with them. I don't know what they're doing, but come meet with them. I thought it was going to be like meeting with the Daughters of the American Revolution. I didn't know what I was getting into. They came in, and they brought a young gentleman with them from Sudan who had been an actual, honest-to-God, up-on-the-block slave. And again, I'm very parochial, pretty naive. I did not realize that there was real legitimate slavery anywhere in the world still. I understand that. That's slavery of a form, but it's illegal pretty much everywhere. This was actually, honest to God, farm work slavery that the government of Sudan, they didn't do it, but they tolerated it. This young man had been taken at the age of, I think he said 15, sold into a farm in Libya. And to this day, when I tell the story, it still moves me. Because it was real. And since then, I have found out that there is slavery around the world that I just didn't know. And I just can't believe that in this day and age that there's slavery anywhere in the world. And this particular case was the government of Sudan turning a blind eye. Every government has bad things happening under their nose. I don't judge them by that. I judge them by the reaction to it. And if the reaction is, what's the big deal? That's unacceptable. So that was the beginning. And then, that quickly, for me, morphed into the genocide in Darfur started. And again, these are not white people and black people. These are people of color, different ethnicities, maybe different races, but the average American wouldn't have a clue. To them, they're all just those people. And I'm no different. I was no expert on Sudan. I came to learn it. Was committed by the government against its own people because one ethnic group wanted the land and actually the grazing rights is really what it boils down to, with a little oversimplification, the grazing rights that another ethnic group had. And they literally bombed and strafed their own people. They painted their own military UN helicopters, all of it well documented, and that got me involved. And then there was a revolution in South Sudan, again, not fully, but significantly along the line of ethnicity. But they wanted their own independence, which we supported. So that's how I got involved with Sudan. It was one step at a time, starting with the fact that the government of Sudan turned a blind eye to what I consider to be I just can't even. It's probably one of the top human rights abuses I can imagine, and for me, it was a very eye-opening situation.
Right, and this issue really issues and how you could come to learn them even like in office.
Oh, absolutely. I mean again, my district is depends how you look at the census. The census indicates that we have, give or take, 30% of the people that I always represented were not born in America. I grew up next door to my grandfather, who was born in Italy. I mean, my wife. So I mean, it's not unusual for us to have some sort of understanding that the world doesn't end at our shores. Very diverse district. There's a majority of nobody in my district, with the exception of women. There is a majority of women, like there is everywhere. But other than that, there was a majority of no race, no ethnicity, no religion, no anything. Everybody had to live together, or they didn't get along. They couldn't live there. So all that being said, I won't say that I was not a foreign policy expert, but I've always had a pretty good understanding of the rest of the world and a pretty deep concern for it. I don't pretend that I know everything. I do not. But I don't have a fear of just the opposite of foreigners. I don't think that people in other countries want anything more than what we want, which is a safe place to raise their family, maybe have some hope that their children can do better than them. There are bad people in every country, including America. There are bad kind of people in other countries of the world. Any country wants the exact same thing as you and I do. I want to be able to make my kids' lives better than mine. I want to be able to eat every day. I want to make sure that nobody was going to shoot me, either somebody I didn't know or my own government. Kind of simple stuff. And I think too many times we lose track of that. We think that because people don't look like us or speak the language that we understand, that somehow they have different feelings. And again, there are some, but we have them here in America. I get plenty of people in America I'm not happy with. But that doesn't mean I don't like America. It means there are a handful of individuals and jerks.
Right. You also sponsored an amendment that increased funding to the African Union by $50 million. And as to your response to the war in Iraq, you also believe that funding in this way is preferable to like direct American action on Sudanese soil.
Well, no, I was pretty vocal. I actually tried to get U.S. troops involved in Sudan. I'm not a pacifist in the sense I don't think there's never a time where military action isn't necessary. I just think it should be used only when absolutely necessary. And in this particular case, I thought that since the world, I would have preferred it would be a UN or an African Union activity, but nobody else is doing it. And in the absence of anybody else doing the right thing, I think sometimes you have to do the right thing. And in this particular case, it would have been the U.S. It's not what I wanted. It was the UN wasn't doing anything. The Europeans weren't doing anything because they'd been a colonial country like most. And I just thought, so that failed. The next best thing is to at least provide them with food and equipment. In this particular case, it was South Sudan, to provide them with equipment to be able to defend themselves against Northern Sudan, which was backed by other countries. So yeah, to me, it's never a choice of the perfect. To me, it's never a choice of the perfect versus the current. It's always a choice. What's the best I can do in the given situation? And in this case, it was a whole bunch of bad choices, which was the best bad choice. And again, sitting back doing nothing, watching people get massacred. I mean, there's still problems there. Then again, most people don't know anybody from Sudan, probably can't find it on a map. And I understand that. I was no different in 1998. But once you become aware of something, you can't get out of your mind, and it's still the right thing to do.
Right. And going through your recent voting record on foreign policy, you voted against votes in particular.
In the last, I don't know, 10 years or so in Congress, there was a big divide. I am for, I want to be real clear, I've always been for a strong military in the United States. Define the term. Yeah, and every time we had a military bill, it was, the United States House would add billions of dollars for their own political purposes. We have the strongest military in the world by far, without exception, without anybody being able to challenge us. We should continue to do that. I'm not arguing that. And then we had the arguments in the last 10, 12 years that was, let's punch up the military budget, and in order to pay for it, let's cut the social budget. Let's cut food stamps. Let's cut senior housing. Let's cut all the other things, education. And my argument, wait a minute. I'm for a strong military, but I'm not for a strong military at the expense of everything else, particularly in times of relative peace. I mean, if this when our existence were on the line, maybe I'd feel differently, but it's not. So I just couldn't find myself. And every bill I ever voted against was a bill that was laden with unnecessary military spending. And again, I want to be real clear. I know some people think, oh, well, you just want to slash the military. I voted against some things that I thought, you just want to slash the military. I voted against some things that I thought were crazy cuts in the military. I want them to have the best equipment. I want them to have, I want to have the best training. I want to have a sufficient number of people in uniform to be able to protect our interests. I'm not against any of those things. I think we should have the best submarines and all the best things we need. That's not the question. The question is whether you use them and whether you have too many of them. And if the military is sitting there saying, look, we only need 6 carriers, well, why would Congress add 2 more? And I know why, but and I'm even willing to do that if we'll pay for them. If the way to do that, to add military equipment we don't need, or to be in an Iraq where we don't need to be, is the expense of that is to cut the food stamp program. I'm not going to do that. So that's why. I voted for military budgets for a long time, and I voted against them because the debate in Congress has changed in the last years.
Right. And this goes to show sort of the politicization of bills and how sort of the names or the intentions are sometimes masked by a lot of text.
It's not new. That's been going on forever. I mean, that's, I always love the people who named bills. I will give my Republican colleagues credit. They were much better at naming bills than we were. They were much better at naming bills than we were. They would come up with the motherhood and puppy dog bill that, in my opinion, hated motherhood and hated puppy dogs. And we'd come up with the let's help everybody bill, no matter what they do. It's like, anyway, so, yeah, but the politicization of bills is not new. That's old, and a big body of government like the Congress.
Right. It's just that this, in particular, like the way you actually vote on bills, it matters a lot. The reading and sometimes surface level people might say, oh, this person get voted against this bill, but they won't have any idea of what the actual contents were, unlike a congressman who had to sit through.
And they'll have one idea. They'll know one bill of any significance other than naming a post office that didn't have some good and some bad in it. That's how you get bills through a 435-person body. You have to have things in there that you don't like, but I needed those 20 votes from Texas and whatever it might be to get that bill through. So guess what? You suffer through. Every bill I've ever voted on of any significant nature, there was some good and some bad, and the job of a member of Congress is to weigh the good versus the bad. And I will guarantee you cannot find a bill that anybody would say, I like every aspect of it.
Right. And you sort of touched on this, but to speak more broadly, especially in current events, how do you see America's role in the world, in the global stage, as it stands now, with the possibility of China looming as a threat, and maybe even Russia? How do you see us now? Like, do you think our role is currently adequate, or do you see us as lacking some areas? What is your opinion on that?
I think we have one foot in an isolationist approach. I'm not an isolationist. I'm also not an interventionist. Again, it's a very difficult balance. There's a lot of different things going on in the world, but at the same time, when everything's said and done, my love of America is based on the dream of America. I'm not the richest guy in the world. I don't drive a Rolls Royce. We had a struggle like everybody else. I had a 2-family house because I needed rent to pay the mortgage. So that's not the point. The point is to pay the mortgage. I mean, so that's not the point. The point is you can have a dream in America and you have some chance of succeeding at that dream. And, I would argue it's not a level playing field for everybody. That's been my driving force, is to try to level that playing field. But not equal outcomes. I do not believe there will ever be equal. Not everybody's going to be a billionaire. Some people are going to fail and try something else. But everybody should have an equal shot at being whatever it is they want, which is why you're in college. And I think, again, you may fail at college. This college may not provide you with the opportunity to make all the money you want to make. But at the same time, I think you have the opportunity. That's up to you. So that's been the driving force, and I don't even know where we get off on that, but you get off on a tangent once in a while.
Yeah. To reiterate, America's role on the global stage.
Oh, the global stuff, and because of that, because I believe in that, I think we have a moral obligation to try to share that for all mankind. I really do, and then on top of that, we happen to be the biggest economy in the world. We happen to have the biggest military in the world, the strongest military. I don't think that it would be morally right for America just to pull up the ladder and just try to ignore the rest of the world. It has been tried. Again, you really should be a student of history if you're going to be involved in government in any capacity. It was tried. People forget that there's a big. It was tried. People forget that there's a big fight before World War II about whether to get involved, and there was a big, huge fight about it. I mean, Charles Lindbergh, the leader of the world. Oh, we all love Charles Lindbergh. Fine. He was pretty much said, well, what's the problem with the Nazis? What's the big deal? We don't need to get involved with them. And, he's entitled to his opinion, which again, she's proved that wrong. And so therefore, had we done that, it would have been, I think it would have been a huge mistake, and the world would now be speaking German.
Right.
Not that I don't like the Germans, but just, I didn't like those Germans.
You don't like the idea of everyone being forced to speak German.
Yes. But that particular government is not the government that I would like to see imposed on anybody.
Right. And moving back into sort of broad strokes experience as a representative, can you share with us what you consider to be one of the most important pieces of legislation that you were involved with personally?
Everything.
Any particular that stands out?
Well, obviously the ACA, Obamacare, but Dodd-Frank bill. I every transportation bill, every financial services bill. I was very active in a lot of the appropriation bills. People do different things and do it different ways. You're not going to find my name attached to too many bills. You're not going to find my name attached to too many amendments. Like I said, I'm a parochial, simple politician. I'm pretty good at working back rooms, and I would get most of my stuff without having to fight it on the floor or fight anybody else. And that includes when the Republicans were running it and when Democrats ran it. So when a bill came along that had something that I had an interest in, Dodd-Frank being the classic example, I actually was needed to be on the conference committee, and somebody else wanted it for political reasons. I said, yeah, fine, put them on. That doesn't mean I didn't get everything I wanted in the Dodd-Frank. Not everything. You never get everything, but it didn't mean I didn't get a lot. And by that, for me, I was focused on things about housing in particular. I was focused on things about credit rating in particular. Those are the two things I focused on. Because everybody was focused on everything, but those are two things that seemed like very few people were focused on. So I kind of tried to fill empty space. So for me, I can't honestly tell you that there's one piece of legislation, the Sudan bill that you just mentioned. I was involved with getting a piece of legislation through. Not of all those, the lead guy in getting a piece of legislation through on. Again, this is a terrible thing. I had never heard of it, but after Yugoslavia fell apart in the Balkans War, there were reports of rape camps in the region, and which something I had never heard of. But again, maybe a little naivety, but nonetheless, they had taken women and basically jailed them and used them as their own sex slaves at their will. I find that, again, just stunningly horrendous. Again, I know bad things happen in war, and I do see a difference between something bad happening at the spur of the moment versus something happening bad that is thoughtful and over time. There is a difference. Anyway, so that had happened, and these women were coming forward with these horrendous stories, and I won't say they were being ignored, but I don't think they were being taken seriously enough. come up with a piece of legislation to provide some funding for the women that were victims. And again, not a big piece of legislation, didn't do everything I wanted to do, but we did something. And I'm very proud of that. But it was, again, it wasn't a piece of legislation. We got an amendment to an appropriation bill. All that being said, so the bill. All that being said, so the answer to your question is, I was there a long time. 20 years is a long time. I participated in a lot of pieces of legislation. The work I did in the ACA, I'm very proud of. And again, that's not a bill that I would say I love every piece of. Not even close. I dislike a lot of the ACA, and so therefore it made it an easy yes for me. Anyway, all that being said, I'm pretty proud of what we did.
Right. So you could you just are overall proud of your record, and you maintain that pretty much all these votes that you acted in your best interest.
I got asked the question yesterday. I have not a single vote that I regret. I only made one vote in my 20-year history that at the time I took it, I made a determination it was a political vote, and it was political because I believed my constituents would want me to vote for the bill, though I didn't like the idea. It wasn't the end of the earth. It was campaign finance reform. I didn't think it was going to change anything. I actually thought it was going to change it for the worse, and I think over history it has proven it has. But nonetheless, at the time, everybody wanted campaign finance reform because in my district, when you say campaign finance reform, everybody is for it, though they don't want to hear what that means. And so you make a judgment, and on that was the only bill I didn't really want to, or against, whatever. I've always voted my conscience, and had the luxury to be able to do that.
Right. And to send us off, is there any advice or insight you would have liked to know before entering Congress that you understand now?
The only thing is for me, and again, this is a real technical insider thing, is I wish I had known that the rules were not the rules. And I did that because I'm kind of a technical guy. I worked in the legislative bodies all my life, and I became a rules expert both in my local community and at the State House in Massachusetts. A big advantage over a lot of other people who had different opinions than me. And when I came to the House, I thought I would do the same thing. And I started doing it. I became very friendly with all the people in the parliamentarian's office until I realized quickly that pretty much every bill was exempted from those rules, so why bother to learn them? And I actually don't think that's good for a legislative body. I think there are way too many special rules in the House. But again, the average person is not. The rules are kind of a boring, mundane part of legislative process, which of course is what gave me the advantage, because everybody else found them boring. And I would use them to drive a train through it. So, but all that being said, I guess that would have saved me some time.
Right.
But other than that, no. I kind of knew what was going on, and I guess one other thing in my political life before coming to Congress, you got extra credit for telling people the truth, in the sense that if you were with somebody, you told them you were with them, you're with them. If you were against somebody, if you told them you were against them, they may not like it, but they respected you, and maybe the next time. I came to realize that in Congress there are an awful lot of people who position on a certain matter and think that gives them an advantage. And for those of us who actually told the truth, in the sense, say, I'm sorry, I can't be with you on this bill, created a few enemies that I wish and don't get me wrong, it wouldn't have changed anything. I never changed how I operate, but at least I would have liked to have known that other people was a positive and helped you and gave you honor and respect. In Congress, I won't say that that's always true.
Right. And what about for our young listeners who are maybe interested in public service? Do you have any basic advice you could provide them?
My advice is do it. My advice is do it. And don't worry about plans. Don't worry about being in office yourself. You can influence things from all kinds of positions. My whole political career was based on working outside the system. I was never helped by my party. I was never helped by my party. I was never helped by by the so-called bosses, or however term you want to use. I was always the guy who was outside that. Now, I worked with people like that because I had to work with people like that over the years. Not one of them ever helped me. We did it on our own. I argue that it doesn't. Be who you are. Don't try to put yourself into. Don't. If you're a round peg, don't try to fit yourself into a square hole. Be who you are. And understand you're not going to win every fight. You understand you are not personally anointed with the answer to every issue. It doesn't mean you shouldn't fight for your opinion. It just means that on occasion you have to compromise. And I've always argued that the old half a loaf is better than nothing. That's life. It's not just politics. That's life. Even my wife. I am not Tom Cruise. My wife didn't get the perfect mate. Wife didn't get the perfect mate. I tried to be good, but that I, on the other hand, got the perfect mate. Any guy out there should be listening to that and take notes.
Well, thank you, Representative Capuano. It has been an absolute pleasure.
By the way, thank you for saying the name. Familiarity with Latin languages.
I speak Spanish.